1 year ago, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association welcomed a new Chief Executive Officer to its team. And joining us today is Forrest Roberts, CEO of NCBA. Thanks for taking some time with us today.
You bet. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
You know, your home state of Texas has rolled out some great hospitality for us this week. What would your general assessment of the convention be?
Kevin, we've had a long and a very intense week here in San Antonio, and those of us that are from this part of the world, we love to call this God's country. We've had a great turnout, and I really feel that the mood across the crowd, across the entire convention, from really the get-go all the way through the end of our meeting here, has been very positive. So if you think about all the things that have happened in our economy and really what's happened in our industry, you might think that people would come into this thing a little growly and maybe a little bit looking to what's wrong with the industry. But I really feel that the sense I'm getting is that people come in here to learn. They come in here to engage and really be a part of the process to move this industry forward. So I really feel good about what we've done here this week. We've made a lot of changes to how we flowed through the entire week, and the feedback I've had has been extremely positive. I had one gentleman that was upset, and he said, I think I want my money back on one of the sessions, and so I was concerned about why, and he said, well, it was standing room only, so maybe that's not all bad a problem to have.
It's a good problem to have. Well, speaking of advancing the industry, I know there's been a lot of really pertinent and frankly critical issues being discussed this week. Would you mind recapping for our viewers some of the key issues that you all talked about and discussed this week?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that if you look at everything that's been discussed this week, it really will center back to what I would consider to be the principle of this organization, and that principle is about we are focused on protecting the right of our producers across this country to have the freedom to operate their businesses the way that they need to continue to not only make that business profitable, but to move it on to the next generation. And so if you think about the issues within that ability to have freedom to operate, that's where I would start with environmental issues. Those are some major issues around climate change and what our organization has been focused on there in Washington, D.C. Equally as important is when you look at issues like estate tax, or what is commonly known as the death tax. There's been a lot of discussion this week about how exemption levels and even everything from that to an inflationary index is being discussed in terms of legislation that would be moving forward here in the 2010 calendar year. And also when you look at what producers need every day, they need tools so that they can continue to operate. And if some of this legislation that comes forward that would take away tools like antibiotics and require them to use them much differently, that might hamper their ability to have, again, that freedom to operate. So those are just two or three of the major headlines in terms of issues that have been discussed here. That's looking more out toward that producer in the country. Yeah. Inside, if we look at the organization as a whole, we've had a tremendous discussion here this week about how we evolve NCBA to the next level. As an organization, we've discussed a lot this week around our governance structure and how we come out of this meeting with a much more effective, much more efficient, and a much more nimble organization by making some changes to our governance structure. So when you put all that together, I really feel that people feel like they really advanced the ball here, as the old saying goes, this week in San Antonio, and they're leaving here feeling like they really got something accomplished and they've got some action.
Well, there's no doubt that a common theme on this show during the convention has been change. Change in Washington, D.C., change in the industry at large. What do you have planned for 2010 to help Cattlemen and the organization prepare for and win in these changing times?
That's a great question. And as an organization, NCBA is really focused on, if you take that whole notion of our principle of freedom to operate, we're taking that one step further and looking at everything we can do to preserve that right of choice for our producers, that right of choice and how they look at their business model, how they look at their production practices. And so if you take that premise and you look at what are we as an organization going to focus on in 2010, the marching orders that we're coming out of this convention with, again, those are marching orders, if you will. The direction is coming from the grassroots of this organization through the policymaking process. And I think what you're going to see is three major areas of focus. Number one is how we really focus in on the current demand picture with beef, and how we regain some lost demand that we've had because of the result of what's happened in our economy over the last couple of years. And equally as important within that is how we look at enhancing or protecting modern beef production practices. As you well know, our industry is under attack on a lot of different fronts. And this is an area for us to really focus on, not only promoting beef, but also modern beef production practices. At the same time, there's a lot of discussion here in direction for us about how we increase value to our owner members and how we look at areas of education, other areas of services that are of value to them. And then I think last but not least is a lot of these governance changes. It's really starting to implement a lot of the work that's been done thus far to say, how do we make this organization more effective and more efficient when we look at making decisions? And how that comes about, I'd say those are the three really key priorities that we're coming out of this meeting with.
Outstanding. Well, Forrest, congratulations to you and your team for a great convention. We appreciate your leadership.
You bet. Thank you very much.
You bet. If you'd like to join the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, call us at 1-866-USA-BEEF or visit beefusa.org.